Well, folks, spring training is always a time for the young stars to make their name. And Termar Johnson already has made an instant impact in spring training on Monday. And we're going to talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Pirates, as well as a lot of other early spring thoughts. I'm very excited. As you can tell, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You're probably used to seeing Gary on Mondays. We took Monday off. It's fine. We'll be all right. Everything's fine. Everybody's okay. You're still getting 5 episodes this week. I'm just going to double up on one of the other days. Might be today. Who knows? But we're still here, and we're talking Pittsburgh Pirates. And the best thing I think right now, Gary, and why I'm so excited about having you on the show today, the show, by the way, brought to you by FanDuel, FanDuel Sportsbook, single greatest sportsbook in the world, is we actually have real baseball that we could physically see on our television screen or, on the MLB app for the games that haven't been televised and actually have things to talk about. And I think it's very nice that we're still kind of in off-season mode. It's the 4th game of spring training today, still February, but we've already seen a good bit of things happen in these first 3 spring training games for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And everybody on my feed yesterday, yes, I know I thought we were going to have an episode later in the day. Well, we know what you're talking about on the show now. And yeah, you know what I'm talking about on the show now because my favorite prospect in the system, Termar Johnson, decided he just wanted to make an instant impact on Monday afternoon. 2 home runs from him, 105, 104 off the bat. And you just look at the kid from an out, like if you just had no idea who Termar Johnson was, if you just didn't know, you look at him, he's 5'8", maybe 5'9", if we're being generous. And you see this kid throw it over the fence twice and not just put it over the fence. I mean, we're talking like really putting it over on these home runs. And it got me so giddy because yes, folks, I know that a lot of people are going to say, well, now we want him to start second base this year. It's not happening. I don't think he touches Pittsburgh with a 10-foot pole this year. But what it does offer you is when 2025 rolls around, if he can perform to an adequate enough level this year, he's going to be in AAA at some point this year. That's just going to happen. He's probably going to start the season probably in Altoona because, as you've mentioned on this show before, there's no point of sending him back to Greensboro, really, because you can't really learn much in that baby ballpark. And based off of what he did yesterday, Gary, he might hit 30 home runs in Greensboro if he played there all year, maybe even more than that. And I also get it. It's the 3rd spring training game and his first look at MLB pitching and all this other stuff. But this is what's so fun about spring training is what other time would we be able to talk about Termar Johnson hitting 2 home runs off of legit MLB relievers other than the end of February?
Right. I mean, there's a couple of cool notes on that, that I'm sure you saw online. I guess he's the first teenager to hit 2 home runs in a spring training game since Carlos Correa in 2014. That's pretty cool. Saw that from Joe Block. That's interesting. I didn't know that. What was really cool, though, is he hit this off of 2 major league pitchers, as you mentioned. One of them was Genesis Cabrera, and that was the second home run. Big lefty, tough against lefties, and Termar just turned on a first pitch slider and line drived it out of the park. Line drive. I mean, this was I don't know if I can swear on here, a piss missile, I think. Is what I like to call it.
I'm sure I'll get a text from Jeff if it's not.
It was unbelievable. It was just a straight line and just a crazy shot. First swing, boom. The other one, he gets to an 0-2 count and then just absolutely turns on high heat.
Yeah.
And just punts it out of the park. He didn't just get it high and let the wind take it. That thing was 104 off the bat. I don't even know how he generates it. I mean, you talked about his size. I don't know where it comes from, except the swing is gigantic. I mean, it actually kind of reminds me of Bellinger in a way.
A little bit.
It's so big, the follow through on it and everything. I don't know. I'd say pump your brakes on it just a little bit, if only because, first, you're right. He ain't making the team this year. In fact, he'll probably be cut within a week, just so he avoids the MLB rules where an injury can start your service clock. And I would expect that to take place here. Paul Skeens as well. So if you're going to get mad about it, go ahead and get mad now. And the other thing I would say is that, yes, they're major league pitchers. Yes, they have good stuff, but they aren't scouting Termarr Johnson to make sure that they're throwing him things that they think that they need to get outs. They're throwing pitches just to get pitches in. So,
and even I would use that exact same analogy for what we'll talk about later when we're talking about Roansy and some of these other young pitchers that we've seen already. It's so hard in spring training because, yes, hitters are more naturally going to have a better spring, usually, in my opinion. It's just how it works with baseball. I think they ramp up a little bit quicker, and it's just not as difficult to step in the box and swing at stuff that you've seen before, especially when these guys are basically just throwing whatever they're being told to throw. I mean, we've seen it already, even yesterday, or in that game against Toronto, to use this as a perfect example. Yusei Kikuchi was in the game and pitching well for them early on, but even Sportsnet Toronto was saying he hasn't really ever thrown a changeup, and Danny Jansen was literally telling him to throw changeups like 10 times. I mean, he's throwing the changeup so often, and that's because this is the time to do it. And that's why I wanted to highlight the Termarr thing again so much, because I've already said it. You're not going to get the opportunity to see him get this opportunity again for at least a year after spring training's over. Yeah, he might face somebody in like some random rehab start, and he might face a lot of the top prospects down in AA and stuff like that, but you're not going to see him have the opportunity to step into the box against legit MLB relief pitchers and do what he did. And I agree with you as well. I don't think he'll be up here that much longer. I'd even probably say next week or the week after will probably be after that. And you mentioned Paul Skeens too. I told everybody on social media already that I think we maybe see him maybe one time in spring, and that's it. And I don't think we need to see him any more than one time.
I think you might see him more than that, but you'll only see him once before, the cut down day. Yeah. I think you'll see him once there, and then you'll see him get some more time, but he won't be part of Major League camp anymore. That's all. Yeah. Same with Termarr. He'll probably get more at bats after he's cut as well.
Yeah. And it's no big slight to either of them, obviously. I just know that they're heavily amplified prospects, being the top two guys. But again, it's so fun with the Termarr thing that now when this kind of stuff happens, Gary, and I think you could tell how giddy I am about it, this is the kind of stuff that lets me know that baseball is truly almost back. Because, I could say, oh, yeah, Termarr might hit 2 home runs in a spring training game. Instead, he went ahead and did it anyway. And now he gave somebody something to talk about for the first 10 minutes of a podcast. And he gave other people stuff to talk about for however long they want to talk about it. And again, it's spring training. Folks, if you ever want to know why I say that so much, just remember on this show, 2 years ago, on this show, the day before opening day, I was talking about Kevin Newman breaking the spring training batting record. You see where that led now, right? And a fun fact, by the way, as well, I believe it was Kevin Newman and Eric Gonzalez in a game with the Reds yesterday, turning a double play. And I thought that was very fun to think about. And Jeff Carr over at Locked On Reds also mentioned it as well. But Termarr Johnson, folks, I'm telling you, this kid's going to be special. He is. He's just not going to be special this year. He'll be special in the minor leagues this year, but next year, be prepared for Termarr Johnson to really push to make this roster next year.
It's really funny because you look at the second base setup right now, and you've got Nick Gonzalez and Leo Piguero and Chang and Alvarez is involved in it. Triolo. They even started working Connor Joe out at second base a little bit. Alika Williams is floating around. They've got a ton of G1 Bay. They still
Yeah.
seem to think can play second base for some ungodly reason. But they have all this stuff that they have working through, and any of them, like even if, let's say, Liover Peguero wins, let's say it goes straight up chalk, and he wins the second base position. Immediately, I'm looking over my shoulder if I'm him. Second base ain't mine.
No.
Like,
No.
like I obviously, like, that doesn't mean that Liover Peguero can't have a long and productive MLB career or be the second baseman. Maybe Termar's a DH. Who knows? But that kid's coming.
Yeah.
There's just no denying it.
Yeah, that train is on the tracks and it is not stopping. It's moving kind of slow right now just because of his age and his development and everything, but it's still a moving train. But they have a lot of other things that we can talk about from these first couple spring training games. And we're going to get into Roansy Contreras because it was very nice to see Roansy come back after whatever 2023 was. And we didn't learn a ton there, but Gary has a lot that he wants to share about it as well. But before we do that, we're going to talk about eBay Motors. Well, I'm sure Termar Johnson probably uses eBay Motors because he was the MVP of yesterday's game, even if the Pirates lost. And they have millions of parts for your MVP ride. You can win every time with parts that fit your ride over at eBay Motors because passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And folks, also don't forget that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and now is also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, like myself, plus our national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app and, of course, YouTube. And also, thank you for tuning into the show, as you always do, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. We're talking early spring training thoughts here with Gary Morgan, who saw that on the right ticker I have Roansy debuts on there. And we saw Roansy come in, I believe it was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. And my days are getting all mixed up, folks. It's okay. We'll be all right. And takeaways, one, I think the biggest takeaway, and then I'll let you kind of go crazy on it because you had a lot to say about it in 5 Thoughts at 5 on Steel City Pirates. The velocity at least looked like it came back a little bit. I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from everything that he did, is he was sitting around 95, 96. He looked comfortable. He didn't really look like he was all that scared of anything. He looked like confident. He was standing up there like he was an MLB pitcher again. But I'll let you kind of take it away because I want people to also read this story after you hear what Gary has to say on the show here about Contreras.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a lesson in what you look for in spring training. You know, first outing for Roansy. Obviously, people want to see a bounce back. People were looking for 2 scoreless out of him, and I don't think that most fans would have cared how he got that 2 scoreless. If he went up there and threw 15 curveballs and got through 2 innings and put up no runs, I think everybody would go, okay, Roansy's back. Well, I wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, I need to see that heat. I need to see the velocity. I need to see what he's doing with it. Can he command it? Is he commanding his off-speed stuff? Well, the Pirates need to see that too. And Roansy needed to see it. They said last year that it was a mechanical issue that caused his velocity change. He's worked his butt off, in his own words, this offseason to get that velocity back consistently. Last year, he was still able to get the velocity. He would hit 97 every once in a while, and people would go like, see, it's still in there. But he couldn't do it consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So the plan early this spring was, let's have him just throw high heat, and that's it. 4-seam fastballs at the top of the zone. And you're starting to figure out, hey, my stuff does move enough to get outs. Hey, my stuff is fast enough to get outs. Hey, I can get soft contact with this pitch at the top of the zone, and that does make my curveball look that much more devastating. So that's all they did. And they threw it to 3 of the most prolific high fastball hitters in the game today, starting with Bichette and Vladdy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, there's no game plan there. They're not trying to get outs. They're not trying to win a game. They're trying to teach this kid to throw his fastball, get the fastball working, get command of the fastball, prove to yourself that you can get some soft contact. And he did. He jammed Vladdy. Bichette, no doubt, got a nice hit off of him. But everybody else, it was pretty loose contact, man. It's exactly what you want to see. Not the results you want to see, but when they're game planning at bats and everything, he has that in his quiver now. That's what's important. The fastball is back. Mechanically, they like where he is. So does he.
Which is good. I mean, you look at how people have spoken about this rotation, both nationally and locally, and just from fans alone, is you'll hear people say this rotation sucks again. And I mean, there is a lot to say that you have to see a lot of things happen first. This was a good, necessary first step, I think, in the maturation of Roansy coming back to where he wants to be. Again, it's 2 innings in February. But as you mentioned, a lot of people will look at that box score, and just if you want to hear the box score, it was 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, and a 9 ERA with no strikeouts. You shun away from that immediately. But again, that's not what it's about when it comes to Roansy's situation. You can look at results overall in spring training, I think, in my opinion, from pitchers, especially if they're not in the situation that Roansy's in, where you just want to see him get back to what he is.
I mean, I see that you have us transitioning into young pitchers right after this, and Jared Jones is a perfect lead-in.
Mm-hmm.
They did the same kind of thing with him.
Yeah.
They spent all last year teaching him a changeup. He didn't throw one in his debut here for spring. He threw pretty much all fastballs and sliders, 1 curveball.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly they're working on the fastball. They're working on the slider. They didn't need anything else for that outing.
No.
That's all it is. You have to understand that each player has an individual plan, and winning a game in spring is not part of the plan. Later on in the spring, when you start getting down to the point where you're sitting on like 30 players, you're ready to start thinking about going north. Yeah, you'll see them flip the switch to trying to win those games, but that's not what's going on now.
No. And speaking on the other young pitchers outside of Contreras, even yesterday that pitched, I mean, we saw a very good inning from Braxton Ashcraft yesterday. You're very excited about him and think he can make a real impact on this team this year. Colin Selby, albeit the 2 walks, had 2 strikeouts in that scoreless frame. Willie Peralta, who a lot of people were like, probably just depth. He looked good yesterday, in my opinion, outside of the 1 walk. And other than that, you didn't really have much. You already mentioned Jared Jones. We've even seen Brett Honeywell, who did pretty okay in his outing. We've seen Cam Allred, who really just struggled in that spot. I think, well, no, not struggled in that spot. Sorry, did really well in that spot. I was looking at the wrong part of this. And really, the thing that I'm liking so much that we're already seeing from the pitching especially is a lot of these guys just look like they belong. And especially in the bullpen, where we've spoken about the bullpen already being potentially a top 10 unit. I mean, Jose Hernandez, for instance, on Friday had a 3 strikeout frame. And you look at him last year, and he was an integral part of this bullpen last year due to the fact of course, Harleen Garcia having his injury. But now you look at the bullpen, you're like, where does Jose Hernandez exactly fit in the fold?
Right.
And you couldn't say that last year. I mean, even Josh Fleming, who got name dropped yesterday on Sportsnet as a signing by the Pirates, I was like, yeah, I kind of forgot. Like, I didn't forget that they got Josh Fleming, but he's also not exactly one of those guys that you're going to see as a major piece. But he's still good depth to have behind everybody else. And I think this is like great to look at because you're usually in spring, you saw it a bit yesterday. You'll have some of those pitchers, no doubt have no chance of making this team. They're just there to eat innings. But you look at some of these games and you look at the 7 or 8 different pitchers that are pitching, and you can make a real argument for a lot of these guys to be on this roster at some point. And I think it's just very fun to talk about that.
I could make a real honest case that Dowry, Moretta, and Hernandez don't make this team, like out of camp. And people think that's crazy because, hey, Moretta looked really good, and he did. But you got to start thinking about who's got options too.
Yeah.
There's a whole other side of this story that we haven't even heard yet. Some of these NRIs, like Honeywell, for instance, really good, for instance. And he's a guy that I thought the velocity really came back for him yesterday or the other day when he pitched, and it looked really good. I was impressed by him. He's got a pretty good track record. If he's got an opt-out, like if he doesn't make the roster, you could see them deciding that it's okay to option some guys to back down and start with them. You could even see them decide somebody like, I wouldn't do it, but you could see them say something like, hey, we need the innings this year, so let's start out with Honeywell and start Majinski in AAA. He's got options. We'll bring him back up. I don't think they should do that, but I think you're going to see them have to face some tough decisions like that. And that's just the truth of it. Most of their bullpen has options, legitimately.
Yeah, and it's a unit, too, that we've spoken about already. And before we get into the top stars, I'll leave it with this. It's a unit that just because you're hearing guys go down to AAA and some guys go up, I don't think you're going to see much of a drop-off when those things happen. And if you also see a guy in the bullpen struggle for a couple weeks at a time, Pirates have real guys they can bring up and just say, hey, man, go back down to AAA and figure it out if you have the options. And options are the funnest part of all this because Ben Cherington loves them. And right now, the Pirates also have a lot of options with top stars that we've already seen in spring training, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Before then, I'm going to talk about FanDuel. Folks, FanDuel Sportsbook is here for you all basketball season, especially next month with March Madness, because I have no clue who's going to win college basketball's championship this year. But you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. And you can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams, like my new rebranded Los Angeles Clippers next season, with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot today, because FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And folks, of course, if you're looking forward to today's game, which I don't think is on TV, I think I've already seen this. Marco Gonzalez makes his Pirates debut today against Chris Sale. So lots of velocity to see there. If you can't hear the sarcasm in my voice when we're talking about a Chris Sale versus Marco Gonzalez matchup, I think that'll be very fun to see. Obviously in Bradenton against the Atlanta Braves, so I wouldn't have been able to watch it anyway. But throughout these first couple games, again, Henry Davis, I think, is a guy that a lot of people wanted to mention because he looked very good. What day was that? Was that Saturday? Yeah, Saturday. Obviously not on TV, but we saw the StatCast metrics and everything else. And again, we've talked about Henry Davis a lot this offseason. Still talking about him now with the Grandal signing and what he's going to be for this team. And I think Henry Davis really on Saturday wanted to come out and do very good things. Obviously went 2 for 3, scored a run in there, looked good. You've seen other guys like O'Neal Cruz, Ke'Bryan Hayes, Ryan Reynolds kind of, come into the fold. Jared Triolo has even done a couple of good things, but other takeaways that you've had, Gary, from these first couple of games that I might not be thinking about.
I mean, I thought Henry looked fine behind the plate. I was happy to see that. I didn't, obviously see more than highlights, but again, you're seeing the underlying numbers and the reports from from people that he looked good. Derek Shelton seemed to really be pretty high on how he performed, and that's good. I do think like the whole Grandal, Henry starting in AAA thing is just patently stupid.
Yeah.
It's just not what you think it is. I don't understand why people are losing their minds about this at all. It's like me saying I have a Honda, so that means I can't have a Nissan. Like I have both. Like so, like
It's
it just
fine.
doesn't make any sense that it needed to be like that. I don't know. We have some time to kind of learn more about Davis first here. I do think they plan to have him catch quite a bit. And I do think that they're testing him by throwing him in there with some different pitchers that tend to throw some dirt balls. He has done a good job blocking this spring and all camp, from what I hear. That's one of the biggest things they were worried about. I also think they're going to buck a little bit of a spring training trend with him. And I think you're going to see them game plan a little bit more earlier on than you tend to see them do in spring, at least from a catcher learning how to prepare his pitcher to face hitters. I think you're going to see him get like little abridged versions of those scouting reports and start trying to work with them. So we could see it actually benefit some pitchers as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I've wanted to watch all spring is I wanted to see Henry catch a lot. I just wanted I want to get that large sample size over the course of a couple games with different pitchers and different like type pitchers and how they throw, just because it's something that I think they need to do. It's just good practice. Do it while the games don't count. You don't want to have Henry Davis, which he still will be trying to figure it out when it comes to the opening day roster and everything, but you would like him to be a little bit more comfortable about it. I think you would like him to be in a spot where he feels like, oh, what I did over the last month and a half and those stints that I had catching is helping me right now when we're actually playing games that count. And I agree too. Game plan a little bit sooner. Let him get used to it. I would especially do it with the guys that you think are definitely going to be here. Do it with Mitch Keller for an inning. Do it with the guys like Dauri Moreta even, or Aroldis Chapman or David Bednar, or guys that you know are probably going to be on the roster, so that when they get to that point and they're in an actual game, he said, oh, I did this a month ago. This is easy peasy lemon squeezy at this point. And that's something that I think for Henry Davis, it would just be good practice to have him catch quite a bit this spring. And again, already has shown some pretty good things.
Yep. I think every week you'll see it look more and more like normal baseball. That's all. And so the stuff that you see like right now, it's not really the biggest deal in the world. It's more just milestones, things that you specifically need to see. Henry jumping on a curveball that bounces after 62 feet. That's important. Yeah. Seeing him frame a little bit, that's important. Throwing out runners, we already know his arm's great.
Yeah.
Taking great swings, important. His bat is what is valuable about Henry.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's hitting, you don't need to worry about anything else.
No.
He's going to make the team. And I think Grandal is going to show himself to be at least visibly deteriorated by the end of spring, if not completely washed, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I hope to be wrong there, but he certainly is not a starter. I just don't understand why anybody's even entertaining that. I mean to tell you, I think like if they were for some reason to decide to send Henry to AAA, I think Jason Delay would be your starter. I really mean that. I don't believe that it's like an either or thing.
Yeah, and I would think so too. And I do think that completely different conversation. I do think if it was Gary Sanchez, like a lot of people thought it might be, think the conversation's a little different, because Gary Sanchez, albeit is also up there too, he's looked better than Grandal has over the last couple of years. I don't think anybody can really argue that all that much.
Yeah, but he had his free agent contract reduced because he's got an injury concern, which is probably something the Pirates knew about too. And so now he's making ever so slightly more than Grandal, which kind of changes the conversation because
Yeah.
you're paying somebody $7 million. Yeah, you can make an argument they should be your starter.
Yeah.
If you're paying somebody $3 million,
Yeah.
they don't have to be.
Which I did always joke with everybody because I remember from MLB The Show last year. Yes, I'm bringing this up to end the show. Guys, everybody wanted Carlos Santana back. He's been a catcher before. With that said, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this show. I know Gary probably appreciated that one. He has been a catcher before. He did it in Cleveland. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the show here on Tuesday, February 27th. It is a leap year, folks, so February has 2 more days. Wednesday and Thursday, of course, we'll be here with you on the Locked On Pirates podcast for all of that. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV app. Make sure you check out Steel City Pirates, where me and Gary do all kinds of work over there. Gary more so, but I've been doing a lot so far to start this year. Also, check out the Pirates Fan Forum this Thursday live. Buy the hat, too. I need to get one. I keep pushing it off because I have to finalize the adoption for my kitten today. So that's costing me a little bit of change, but it's fine. It's fine. But, Gary, anything else that you got going on this week that you want to let the people know?
No, we just had a new piece drop over on Steel City Pirates this morning. It's a really comprehensive history of McKechnie Field, the Pirates spring training home. Really well done by our friend Douglas Smith. So we're happy to have that. And check it out. It's a really in-depth piece, a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. And over here at Locked On Pirates, we will be back tomorrow. You may get another episode today, but you will be getting a double episode sometime this week to make up for Monday. But until then, folks, have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Watch the box score today since we can't watch the game, but, we'll get highlights anyway. And until then, see you on the flip side.